So Hugh, I guess just to begin with, can you sort of tell us sort of why you're standing down now?
Well, it's a difficult decision. There's never a good time to stand down. I was until last week the president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and I didn't want to be a lame duck president. I was pressing NATO to agree to publish its audit reports and accounts, and I think if the NATO Secretary General had thought I was about to wander off into the sunset, he probably wouldn't have agreed to do it, but he has agreed to do it. It's now open and public. Indeed, the first 3 sets of accounts have been published. So I didn't want to do it while I was in office in the NATO job, but I thought long and hard over the weekend when I stood down, and I've talked with my wife, and I think now is the time for me to move on and to put my family first.
And how big a role did your wife and your family play in this decision? Obviously, being an MP must put a huge strain on the marriage.
It's a huge strain. I mean, I work pretty long hours, very often 7 days a week, and the family over the years has got more and more off that they don't get the involvement that they would have expected from a husband and father and family member. It's my wider family as well. Don't see as much of me as they feel they should. So it is a huge burden. They've been terribly supportive, very kind to put up with it for so long, but so long has been too long as far as they're concerned, and now I want to put them first.
And what have been sort of the highs and lows for you?
Oh, I don't know. The highs, I guess, are when you deliver something. I 20 years ago introduced the then novel idea that tobacco advertising should be banned, and I remember at the time the then Conservative government said this would be an absolutely intolerable invasion of freedom of speech if tobacco companies couldn't promote the joys of smoking yourself to death. Now, of course, it's illegal. Nobody would dream of putting ads back on the telly for tobacco. That was a early campaign, and I'm pleased that I was the first to introduce legislation. I introduced the legislation also which made us change our aid programme to focus on poor people in poor countries. I got the law changed so that bribery by British people abroad became an offence in British law, and there was a big test case 3 or 4 years ago when British Aerospace was found guilty of having bribed its way to a air traffic control contract in Tanzania and was forced to pay back all the money that it had received. So those are some of the landmarks. Being a minister was a great experience. I radically changed the benefit structure, improved it for disabled people and for war veterans, ex-servicemen and women. And I was a minister responsible for the benefits that relieve poverty, the means-tested benefits at the time that Labour committed to halving child poverty in a decade and ending child poverty in a generation. And we haven't got there, but we had the biggest, most sustained fall in child poverty in the UK over the decade that followed. It's going the opposite direction now, I regret to say, but it's certainly much better than it was at the time that I became a Social Security Minister. And being elected by MPs from 27 other countries to lead the NATO, parliamentary arm of NATO, was quite a big deal. I was very proud to have gotten that opportunity, and proud to have changed some of the way that NATO works during that time. The public is much more interested in defence matters since the Iraq and Afghan wars, and NATO needs to change and needs to do more to explain what it's doing, why it does it, and how it makes people more secure if they take the measures that they do.
And who would you like to succeed you?
That's not for me, I suppose. As a party member, I'll have one vote like hundreds of other people who are Labour Party members in York. But I don't want to pick a successor. It would be extremely cheeky and arrogant if I tried to do so. I think it will be a very strong field, very strong interest. It's relatively few Labour-held seats that come up as opportunities for would-be candidates. What I'd like to do is to get the message out that the Labour Party is looking for a new candidate, so we get a very strong field of people, and then party members in York will interview them, scratch their heads, and make a choice as who's best to carry the campaign forward to the general election.
And are there any sort of qualities that you think the MP for York Central needs to have?
A passionate interest in York. I've never once taken it for granted that I'd get elected. I know that people may be interested or not in the work I do on international affairs and defence, but the thing that determines how people vote is how they feel I'm doing in making the case for better health services in York, for reducing the impact of the cuts which the government at the moment is imposing, for getting new roads built like the Northern Ring Road, although everybody now says we need a dual carriageway, and they're quite right. I'm supporting, and on that of course I work with Julian Sturdy, in whose constituency the Northern Ring Road comes. One of the good things I've found in this particular Parliament, it's the first one where York's had two MPs, one a Conservative, myself as a Labour MP, and although the things we disagree on budget day and such times, when it comes to working for the benefit of the city, we've been able to work together. I make no assumptions, but I hope the York Central MP after the general election will be a Labour MP. It'll be a tough fight, but I think we'll win. I think Julian will probably continue as the MP for Outer York, and I hope that both MPs will continue to work together when it's for citizens' interests that are at stake.
And you mentioned the timing. Obviously there will be people who will say, well, James Alexander just stood down as your council leader, now you're standing down. Is there any link in the timing, or is it just a coincidence?
No, there's no link in the timing. It gave me pause for thought, I have to say. Should I go or shouldn't I at a time when the Labour group on the council has been going through a difficult time? It's clear that they need to make some changes before the election. The council election will be in May next year, same day as the general election. They've just appointed a new leader, and I've got great confidence in David. He needs to work with his group to work out what the council under Labour leadership has got wrong, and to change those things that it's got wrong, and to remind the public of many things that they've got right and that they've done, bringing John Lewis's to York, getting agreement for a new stadium for the football club and the rugby league club, dealing with the government-imposed cuts in a way that has reduced their impact to the minimum. They haven't been able to wish them away because the money has just been taken from York and put back in the government's coffers down in London. But they've managed a difficult financial situation well. So they've got many things right, but they've got things wrong too, like the bridge. And with a new leader, there's a chance to draw a line under the past and put together a new platform to show what the council is offering in the elections in May. And the bottom line is this: next May in the local elections, people will be choosing whether they want a party that's committed to the cuts that are being forced on York by the coalition government, or whether they want to continue with a Labour council that is seeking to protect the city from that reduction in public provision.
And do you believe that York Central is still a winnable seat for Labour next time round?
I would be very surprised to sit here on May the whatever it is, 8th or 9th, and for there not to be a Labour MP. But it won't be a shoo-in, that's for sure. The Conservatives, every time I've stood, well, the first time I stood, the Conservatives won, of course. I stood and last it was Conservative held a seat. The second time I stood and won, the Conservatives came second, and every election since then the Conservatives have come second. And they will be the challenger this time. I think the Lib Dem vote will hemorrhage away in York. I hope third-party votes won't increase too much. We had a UKIP showing at the last election, and they frankly didn't make any major impact. They're a protest party. They did very well in the European elections and these by-elections, but I don't think they'll have huge traction in York in the general election. The Green Party, the same. I mean, they attract people, attractive things about the Green Party. I hope we don't attract too many people, because the bottom line is in 1987 I lost because the Green Party did rather well. I lost by 147 votes. The Green Party took 626 votes, or 636 perhaps, I can't remember the exact figure, but about 4 times what I lost by. And people have to make a choice at the general election in May. Do they want a Labour MP or a Conservative MP? If they vote for other parties, they will not be determining the outcome of the election. If they want to make a choice for Labour, then they should vote Labour. If they want to make a choice for Conservatives, they'll of course vote Conservative. But I'll be out there on the streets with our new candidate trying to persuade people that a Labour voice is needed for the city.
And how important is it to you that it's a local person and not someone who's sort of parachuted in by the party in London?
Well, I'm very keen that local party members should be the ones who make the decision. I don't want to steer them in one direction or another. What I think is important is that the person they choose is somebody who understands and cares greatly about York. I was not a York resident when I was selected. I lived in London. I was a film producer in London. I did know the city because I'd studied at the university, but I wasn't a local person, but that didn't stop me being a good champion for the city of York. But that's what matters, whether the person comes from, Acomb or Andover is not the issue. The issue is that they understand the city, they get to know the city, they work with people right across the political spectrum. I mean, you fight for votes from Labour supporters in an election, but if you get elected, you've got to support people who are your political allies and people who frankly don't support you politically. But if you're going to do a good job for the city as a whole, you've got to do a job for people of all political persuasions and of no political persuasion. There are of course many people who are not committed to any of the parties who often don't vote, but at this particular election I would encourage people to get on the voting register if they're not already there, and to exercise a vote, because it will be both nationally and here in central York an election where the outcome isn't absolutely certain, and by registering to vote and voting, people will be helping shape the future of this city and the future of the government for the country as a whole.
One sort of final question is, what's your sort of message to those people in York who voted for you in 5-6 elections now?
Please stick with us. I don't know who the candidate will be. We won't know for a few weeks yet. But the Labour Party, while I've been here, has made a difference in York, and I will have a very strong field of candidates, because York's a really attractive place to represent. I mean, if you want to be a Labour MP, any Labour-held seat is a very attractive proposition, but this isn't just any Labour seat. This is a very, very special city, beautiful city to live in, beautiful city to bring your children up in, which I've done as a MP. It's been such a privilege to represent the city of York, and whoever is selected in my place, I hope will get elected as the MP, and for them, him or her, it will be an enormous privilege, and so we'll have to wait and see.